my pleasure to introduce Commissioner Frank Williams.
I'm pretty loud, so I'm going to try this without holding up the mic. Can everyone hear me? Yes. So that's a good. I'm going to do that because I know that the mic was going in and out. First, I want to thank Ted and Fran for the invitation to speak at this ceremony. I've had the chance to speak to numerous groups over the years, but when I received this invitation, I knew it was probably the most important invitation that I'd ever received to speak to any gathering of people, just because of the nature of what this is, and I'll come back to that. I do want to recognize my wife, Lori, who is here with me today. She braved the weather to get down here with me, so let's please give her a round of applause. And I'm just humbled and honored to have the opportunity to congratulate and welcome what will soon be America's newest citizens. So let's give all of the folks on this side of the room. You will soon hear these new citizens take a very solemn oath to defend and support the Constitution and the laws of the United States. And that Constitution is truly something that sets America apart from many of the nations that these people have moved here from, because the Constitution specifies that the government gets its power from us, not the other way around. And I'll come back to that. But another thing I want to point out is that these, I believe 77 as of today, people from 35 countries earned the rank of citizen. And I want to emphasize the word earned. I went online and I looked at the process that they've had to go through to become a citizen. I took the practice test, and it is not an easy test. And the practice test is a lot easier than the real test they had to take. So I would encourage everybody here to go study what they had to do to become a citizen. And despite the fact that they're from 35 different countries, they're all now Americans. They all have that in common, and I'll come back to that as well. I want to talk briefly today about what it means to be an American, what we mean when we say that freedom is not free, and just a few responsibilities that we all share as citizens. First and foremost, the United States of America is unique in the history of the world because it is based on what I said earlier. Our government gets its power from us, from we the people, not the other way around. And I think that's something so important and so unique that we often take for granted. When you boil America down to one single defining characteristic, I can sum it up in one word: freedom. America is about freedom, and everything else, to me, really falls under that. And I'm going to talk about a few specific freedoms that we have, that those of us who were born here, probably take for granted. We all get to choose our leaders. You can vote myself and the mayor into office. If you don't like what we're doing, you can come to a meeting and tell us about it. And trust me, people do that. And they call us all kinds of names. In many other countries, if you did that, it might be the last thing you ever do. But you can do it here without any fear of retribution. If you don't like what we're doing, you can vote us out when we're up for re-election and put somebody new in. In a lot of countries, you don't have that opportunity. If you're charged with a crime, you have the right to due process and to be tried by a jury of your peers. In many countries, if someone in power doesn't like you, they'll charge you with a crime just because they can and punish you just because they have the power to do so. In America, you have the freedom to work hard, to change your place in life, to work your way up in a business, or to work your way up from one level of success to another, and then to reap the rewards and keep the rewards of what you've done, of your own hard work. One of the most precious rights of Americans is the right to own and control private property. We hear the term the American dream, and that's largely focused on owning your own home. That's something that does not happen in many other nations. And one that I think is often taken for granted and underestimated today is the right to worship if you see fit and as you see fit. In many countries, you have to worship the way the government tells you, and people are persecuted, and in some cases, still today in this world, killed because they dare to adopt a religion that's different than what the government prescribes for them. So America truly is the land of the free, and we heard that in the song a moment ago. We also heard what sounded like the bombs bursting in air outside, but thankfully that's not what those were. Today, I found a definition online of what the American dream is. And I don't like to read speeches, but I'm going to read this word for word. The American dream is a set of ideals in which freedom includes the opportunity for prosperity and success, as well as an upward social mobility for the family and children, achieved through hard work in a society with few barriers. I thought that was a great definition. And America is truly about the opportunity to chart your own course in your own life. Now, we obviously are here today to honor the new citizens, but most of us, or many of us, and especially if this had been outside, have been citizens since the day we were born. I was born in America, so I was born into citizenship, and I think most of us who were born here probably take it for granted, and probably don't value what we have in terms of freedom as much as the folks who have worked so hard to earn it. So I just want to pose a couple of questions to those of us who were born here. Do we value our citizenship and our freedom as much as America's newest citizens do? And secondly, could we pass that citizenship test? I would encourage everybody here to go home and take that. I'm proud to say I did pass, but I did not get a perfect score the first time, but I did pass it. And I want to move into now talking about what we mean when we say that freedom is not free. We hear that on Memorial Day, and we hear it on Veterans Day, but what do we really mean by that? First and foremost, freedom came at a very high price. In the Revolutionary War, our founding fathers, many of whom had very comfortable lives, risked everything to break away from the British government on the holiday that we celebrate tomorrow. 4,435 Americans were killed in combat and another almost 7,000 wounded, which is a very large number when you consider how small our population was then. And they were willing to do that because they believed in the idea that these folks were willing to earn citizenship for, that people should be able to govern themselves. But secondly, not only did freedom come at a high price, it's been preserved at a high price. And I'm going to talk specifically about the two world wars and the numbers of people who sacrificed their lives there. World War I, 53,402 Americans died in battle. 63,114 other Americans died in other ways during service, and over 200,000 were wounded in the course of that World War. World War II, and my wife's grandfather is a World War II veteran, one of the few that we still have around these days. Almost 300,000 Americans died in battle, another almost 114,000 in other ways during service, and almost 700,000 wounded during the course of that war. And those numbers are staggering when you think about many of those people were 19, 20 years old, just coming into their life with their entire life ahead of them, and they sacrificed so that we could have freedom. The next thing I want to point out is that freedom is not guaranteed, and that's something none of us should take that for granted. History books are filled with nations that rose and then fell, and that's something that we should not take America for granted. President Ronald Reagan summed that up the best when he said the following: "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We did not pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same." And I think that's something that I would encourage all of us to take to heart today. Freedom cannot sustain itself. If we don't sustain it, if we don't preserve it, and if we don't protect it, one day either us or our descendants will not have it. Give me one moment here because there's an extra sheet of paper that's not supposed to be in this stack. My next point is that freedom needs advocates and defenders. And I believe that the people who we're going to see take the oath in a few moments will be probably the most vocal advocates and defenders because they've earned it. I would challenge the rest of us to be as vocal in our defense of the freedom we have as the people who have taken the time to go through this process that we're going to see here and come to a conclusion here in a moment. And finally, I'll say that freedom comes with responsibility. Many people focus only on the rights, but not on the responsibilities that go with those rights. I believe that for every right, there's an equal responsibility that accompanies it. We the people, and that's a phrase from our Constitution, are the owners of this country. And when you own something, you have a responsibility to take care of it. Our founding fathers passed this down to us and entrusted us with the freedom that's represented by this flag. And so the challenge to all of us is to be advocates for the freedom that they passed down to us and to make sure that we pass it on to the next generation and the generation beyond that. I'm reminded of something that is attributed to Benjamin Franklin at the close of the Constitutional Convention. The way the story has it, a lady approached him and said, "What kind of government have you delegates created?" And his answer was, "A republic if you can keep it." And I think that's the challenge, is can we keep it? Now, in closing, I want to talk again about the folks who have taken the time to go through this process and become citizens. 77 people from 35 countries in 9 regions around the world. looking at the globe, they cover almost every region of this globe. And some of the countries listed on that list that I was given are Burma, Cuba, Kenya, the Philippines, China, Haiti, Mexico, Poland, and an entire laundry list of other countries that all, and these folks may be from those countries, but now they all have one thing in common. They're united in the bond of citizenship in the greatest nation that this world has ever seen. And at the end of this day, we will be able to call you our fellow Americans. So congratulations and welcome to the United States.